Anu Jegadeva is our next speaker, and he was born in Malaysia, and he's based in Melbourne, and he's a very clever man. He's an artist, a curator, and a writer, and tells stories through his work. Many of his pieces are autobiographical, and Anu says, "All my art is an examination of how I fit in the world around me." Let's see how he fits. Welcome, Anu.
I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to the elders past and present. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Anurendra Jegadeva, and I'm a fourth-generation fat Malaysian Hindu of Indian descent, of Western orientation, of course. Married to a short Christian lawyer of the Sri Lankan persuasion. We have a 19-year-old daughter who is dating white fellas, and 2 overweight pugs we shipped over from Malaysia at considerable cost. I grew up in a middle-class family, was brought up by a Chinese ama. My parents, the first of the post-independence university graduates, were civil servants who would have loved for me to have been a doctor or a lawyer, anything rather than an artist and a writer. This multifarious kind of growing up, I think, is what has informed my work. As a Malaysian Indian, like members of the Malaysian Chinese community, till this very day, I'm by and large still considered a pendatang, or a newcomer, within the social, political, and religious makeup of an increasingly Muslim divided Malaysia. Hence our constant adventures in other places, England, Australia, in search of a place where, as Claudia said just now, in a search to fit, basically, or at the very least, where our daughter will fit. As an artist, I've always combined very personal narratives. This is my daughter on a swing in front of our Parliament House in Malaysia. It's interesting because she was born in Malaysia, but she probably stands a better chance of being the Prime Minister of Australia, even though we're new migrants, than of being a principal of a secondary school in Malaysia, right? Because the whole racial makeup is such, affirmative action is such, that that's kind of the things we've come away from. It's different from your story, which is much more dire, but this is quite insidious. It works on you constantly. It's what we talk about in coffee shops, and every day it's what we think about constantly, how we fit, how we fit, how we fit. And because we're never quite pushed against a wall, it becomes like a wine almost, constantly. So that kind of is what I'm trying to do with my work, to address these issues. As an artist, as I said, I've always combined very personal narratives, whether autobiographical or anecdotal, with current affairs linked to race, politics, religion, and class, in trying to describe the world around me. As far as how I make my art, in the age of new media, installation, and performance, I remain enamored by painting, the human figure, and portraiture, all very passé in many ways, as far as curators are concerned. Thanks, Kevin, for including me. I went to the art school in the 80s, at the cusp of, I'm an old guy, at the cusp of this change, really. When I went to art school, painting was king. And in the 3 years of painting, when I left art school, I was told that painting was dead. There was all this new media. But it's the thing I do best, it's what I love. But what it's forced me to do is to try. It's kept me on my toes, because you've got to try and reinvent and push the medium, like you were saying as well. Otherwise, you can't be just pushing paint around a two-dimensional surface, I feel. And you can't be about a blue painting for a blue room, basically. Sorry, I can't see. Then when I look there, I can't see that either. So as I said, I've persevered and been kept on my toes, okay? So as far as the meanings in my work are concerned, yes, I've continued to use our post-colonial context as a starting point, as a backdrop for many of the contemporary issues that preoccupy current debates, especially the issues of race and of the movement of people, be it economic migrants, political dissidents, or refugees from conflict-driven regions. This painting is called This Is Where I Live. As I said just now, we're a very middle-class family. When we were born, my parents would buy a house so that when we reached university age, they would sell the house to send us to, of course, the mother country, England, right? So my sister, this is my sister. She studied in England, went to boarding school there. This is the view from her house in Wales. She lives in London, married a Welshman. That's my great-great-grandfather, when photography was still something you dressed up for, was an event, right? Unlike a selfie today. And it's interesting because he's wearing a tux. He's in an obviously borrowed sidecar. My great-grandmother, it's taken from an old photograph. And basically, they wanted to be so badly, they wanted to be white, right? It's quite interesting. And that whole context, all our influences growing up, that's George from the famous Five and Enlightenment, the Bash Street Kids. We lived in the darkest, deepest of the tropics, and all our influences were Western, right? So that kind of contradiction, I think, is what I find exciting in how I make my work. Histories, cliché, and mythologies form a large part of the work as well. This story, I'll very quickly, I know I don't have much time, but Francis Light is the son of Captain Light, who discovered Adelaide. He discovered Penang, and that's why Penang and Adelaide are sister cities, I think, right? When he arrived in Malaysia, in Penang, in the 1600s or whatever, from Goa in 2 ships, he found that Penang was covered in swamp and couldn't be penetrated, right? But they wanted this jewel in the crown. So what he did was he fired 2 cannons of silver onto the island, right? Silver pieces, it's very biblical. And then what happened was he unleashed 200 coolies from India. Okay, they were in the hold, and to get at the silver, this is the legend, they killed each other and everything, but they cleared the land. The British were very clever, okay? In every trouble spot in the world, they were there first, screwed it all up, and then they left, right? So what I did was, I wanted to do these paintings of the toddy shops in Penang. And of course, I wanted to raise the drunken beast, that the cliche of the Indian man, because he's a coolie. In Malaysia, there is a hierarchy. There's the Malay, then there's the Chinese, that's the business class, then there's the Indian, that's the indentured worker. We all come from that, right? And so there are cliches. We are smelly, we drink, we beat our wives, that kind of thing. I wanted to give them the nobility I think they deserve. So I painted these drunkards because I spoke to these people. I used to be a journalist. So I interviewed all these people, and all the drunkards in the toddy shops basically said they'd lived in the area for over 100 years. So I imagined that they were the descendants of those first 200 coolies who cleared the land. And in doing so, we want to stamp our place, in spite of being told that we are pendatang or newcomers, to constantly remind people that we've been there from the start, that we helped shape the nation as well. Even on a broader platform, I've always used my own stories as starting points. I'm of Sri Lankan origin. Those are some of the drunkards. I am of Sri Lankan origin. So it's India, Sri Lanka, Malaysia, then pretending to be English for a little while, and then coming to Australia, and then we went back to Malaysia for a while, and then we've come back now in the last 3 years. I've always used my own stories as a starting point in addressing issues, any issue, take the Sri Lankan conflict, for example. My hope is that it leads into a discussion beyond their specifics. In telling autobiographical stories, I do try in balancing aesthetics with a broader theme in the work that anyone can relate to, right? So that's why I made them sexy. My father has got 6 sisters. They all live in a little town outside of Kuala Lumpur, the capital of KL. They're very normal, comfortable lives, but I imagine them as Tamil Tiger fighters. Because, but for an accident of geography, we would be using our fridges as cupboards. We would be going through that kind of recruitment that happened in Sri Lanka at the time in Jaffna. So I did 6 of them, and they're each one named Ate, Ruba, according to, they weren't pleased, because I made them sexy, you see. So when they came for the exhibition, they were not that happy. What am I doing? Sorry. I don't have much time, do I? Anyway, there are 6 of these. And this kind of exploring things in a whimsical way gets you into trouble as well. The other thing I've always been interested in talking about the Sri Lankan conflict, sorry. What am I doing? One back. I've always been interested in how men of the cloth, in the name of the most peaceful of things like literature and language and a value system that is compassionate and all. We see it in politicians every day, right? They're supposed to be compassionate and caring, and yet in Sri Lanka, the monks played a huge part in instigating the civil war as well. So a simple device like I did a whole series of monks with guns, right? And to take those 2 juxtapositions and put them together. So there were about 10 of these large canvases in different poses, just boys with toys, basically. But it got me into a lot of trouble, of course, right? We got letters from the Sri Lankan High Commission and everything, right? Saying that they don't carry guns, but, and then I always come back, as I said, to the autobiographical. This is Fat Geelong Fat Rangda lost in Geelong. This is me, again, as I use myself in a lot of the work. And this is, again, the migrant tale. Whether it's food, language, whatever it is, we are in a kind of an alien landscape and playing with those ideas constantly. But having said that, the need to push your practice beyond just painting, which I love tremendously, is to begin to think about other ways of putting forth this whole thing about the British again. My mother is the last of the royalists. She's got all these royal commemoratives, and so this is the portrait of my mother as the Queen. It's taken from the famous Arnolfini portrait of Queen Elizabeth that used to hang in all the government offices at home, in Malaysia even, right? So that's my mom. She doesn't know whether to be happy or angry. She likes the fact that I painted her, but she's a bit making fun of her, aren't I? But in Malaysia, if you're middle class and you arrived, you go to Malacca, which is an old Portuguese town with a lot of antique shops, and you buy a Dutch cupboard. That means you arrived. If you go to someone's house and you see, wow, the Dutch cupboard, so you are. So I made a metal frame out of it with all her things. These are little still lifes painted of all her royal wedding commemoratives and all that shit. And again, playing with the idea of, So she's not sure whether to be happy or not. So we don't know whether we're English or we are Indian or what. We just don't know. There's a saying at home, all the Tamil indentured workers came to Malaya as rubber tappers. And there's a joke that goes around, they say, that why are all Indians rubber tappers? Because latex is white. I love that. Anyway, this is the counter to that. This is portrait of my father as a severed cow's head, right? The cow, of course, is an auspicious and sacred animal within the Hindu belief system. And at home, the cow has been used politically as a symbol of all kinds of things. How many minutes is that? Alamak! That's the Malaysian term for oh dear. Basically, I think you get a gist of what I do. The objects again, I'll just run through them again. This is taken from an Enid Blyton. I grew up on Enid Blyton. So I did an A to Z of an A to Z for middle-aged, middle class, and basically looking at illustrations from Enid Blyton books. This is from Flip and Binkle or something. And basically, it's the Balinese masks painted on these very English characters. And the thing is, but how did we get here, right? So playing with these ideas, I will run quickly, big altar, because I just want to show you the last works that I have. My parents, the whole idea of Malay, Chinese, Indian. This is the People's Re-Education Bus. And this is how my practice evolved from just being paintings. This is the hot chair done for the Cancer Society. A Malay tudung, the Virgin Mary, and Mother Teresa all smoking cigarettes. Yeah. Yeah, and this, I believe that love can conquer all. And, oops, what's happening? This is a wedding dais. Within Chinese, Malay, and Indian cultures, there's a practice of how we sit before the audience, and all the rituals are done on a throne. And this is basically, I built this entire throne that incorporates symbols from all the different races and how they come together, how we come together, even though we deny it, basically. And so this work that's my father's Form 6 class, at a time when racial divides didn't exist in the 50s. And these are details from the work. These are the columns I made, which are rice of the three prime ministers, three significant prime ministers. And of course, we are so, they're such authoritarian governments that the column is on the ground, and unconsciously you step on them. And the whole thought of stepping on a leader's, I wanted to play with that idea, to step on a leader's face, and how people recoiled from it when they realized what they were doing was quite interesting. This is how the installation was, right? These are more recent altars. This particular work is in the show, and it's really talking about how in Malaysia, their treatment of the domestic Chinese is so different, the government policy on that, to their reverence for China as a superpower. I love that contradiction, because the non-Malay is treated so badly at home. But then on a global level, China and India is seen as big brother, right? So these are all new things that are happening, I think, which are quite exciting. Okay, I'm almost done. Sorry, guys. Okay. Okay, yeah. That's fine.